Hi, today you are engaging in the ELA Guidebooks Unit, American Revolution. Throughout this unit, you will read about fictional characters and historical figures whose lives were impacted by the events of the Revolutionary War. Today we will build background knowledge related to slavery and the trading of enslaved people during the time of the American Revolution. Be sure to have your handout and something to write with for this video. As the colonies grew, farms and plantations began to rely on the free and forced labor of enslaved Africans to increase profits. By the time of the American Revolution, there were 4 million enslaved Africans in what is now known as the U.S. Enslaved labor was an integral element in the development and growth of the American colonies. Tensions grew between the enslaved population and the wealthy landowners, due to the enslaved people having poor living conditions, cruel treatment, and no civil rights. They did not feel a sense of belonging in the New World, as they were viewed as objects to sell, trade, and buy. The triangular trading system allowed for the colonial economy to prosper, Britain's economy to boom, and new goods to be available in different parts of the world. The trade of enslaved people was a major part of this triangular trading system. When the American Revolution began, colonists boycotted British goods, halting the system of trade that included enslaved people coming into the British colonies and money back to Britain. Now you are ready to describe how slavery impacted the British colonies. Pause the video and answer the question at stop sign number 1 on your handout. Then press play when you are ready to continue. Let's review your answers. You should have written about how the owners of the plantations in the colonies profited from the free labor they received by forcing enslaved people to work on the plantations. Enslaved people were forced to provide extensive amounts of labor with no payment, so the colonies could increase their funds sent to Britain. Also, the triangular trading system between Britain and the colonies brought enslaved people to the colonies. When the American Revolution began, that trade halted due to colonial boycotts of British goods. This resulted in fewer enslaved people being brought to the colonies and fewer profits being sent over to Britain. During the American Revolution, many enslaved people were forced to fight in the colonial army. More than 5,000 enslaved people were involved in the colony's successful fight for freedom. Enslaved soldiers fought in support of both sides of the war. The soldiers who fought for the British fled to Canada and England after their defeat. Following the Revolution, many colonies in the North granted freedom to the enslaved people who fought with the colonial army during the American Revolution. Despite the soaring rhetoric of the Declaration of Independence and the noble goals outlined in the preamble of the Constitution, slavery remained legal in the United States at the time of its founding and would continue to be so until 1865. Despite the significant aid provided by enslaved people during the American Revolution, the Constitution that was written to declare independence and freedom very purposefully left out the freedom for enslaved people. In fact, the word slave does not appear in the Constitution. The framers consciously avoided the word, recognizing that it would sully the document. Nevertheless, slavery received important protections in the Constitution. The 3/5 clause, which counted 3/5 of a state's slave population in apportioning representation, gave the South extra representation in the House of Representatives, and extra votes in the Electoral College. The Constitution also prohibited Congress from outlawing the Atlantic slave trade for 20 years. A fugitive slave clause required the return of runaway slaves to their owners. The Constitution gave the federal government the power to put down domestic rebellions, including slave insurrections. The Emancipation Proclamation, as a war measure, freed enslaved people within the states that had rebelled during the Civil War. It wasn't until the passage of the 13th Amendment that slavery officially ended in the United States. Now you are ready to describe the impacts of the Constitution on the institution of slavery in the newly founded independent country of America. Pause this video and answer the question by stop sign number 2 on your handout. Then press play when you are ready to continue. Let's review your answers. Despite the hard work of enslaved people in the Revolutionary Army, the Constitution did not positively impact the lives of enslaved people in America right away. Only some enslaved people from northern colonies were granted freedom of enslavement after the war. In fact, the Constitution protected enslavers from the possibility of a decrease in slavery for 80 years following the end of the Revolution. The Constitution contained a clause that prohibited Congress from outlawing the Atlantic slave trade for 20 years. Now you are becoming an expert on the treatment of enslaved people during the Revolution and the impact that freedom from Britain and the establishment of the Constitution had on the institution of slavery in America. Be sure to turn in your completed handout to your teacher.